We've all met smug gits that believe mainstream conspiracy theories and worship them like a religion.
Have you had your flu jab yet? Oh, of course, that never was done by terrorists flying planes into the buildings. Of course, Lee Harvey Oswald thought JFK. It must be true, as I read it in the Daily Sun. I watch the BBC News regularly and know exactly what is going on. I read all the mainstream newspapers, so I'm very well informed.
Such people are no-hope cases. They are suffering from severe establishmentosis and are best avoided. Switch on mainstream TV or radio and we are bombarded with establishment conspiracy theories. This can lead to anxiety, depression and a sense of complete demoralisation. That is what it's meant to do. But don't worry. If you can see through the mainstream propaganda, help is at hand. All you have to do is tune into Mark Windows for well-researched information and no conspiracy theories. Soon you'll be feeling much better. Simply go to www.windowsontheworld.net. Broadcast live every Sunday. Together we can cure establishmentosis.
Hello, I'm Chris and welcome to another broadcast. As I've said many times before, it's very sad to see Britain being destroyed from within whilst the populace is generally completely oblivious to it, and if given the facts they will generally dismiss them as some form of fake news or conspiracy theory. You can't blame them, as that is what they have been conditioned to believe. Admittedly, some people do care and try to do something about it, such as writing to their local MP, doing a peaceful protest, starting a petition, etc. That is the establishment route that I believe is a form of religion that the masses have been conditioned to believe in much the same way as we have been led to believe the UK is a democracy. It is a sort of comfort zone that, even though it's a fantasy that can easily be proven with facts, people don't like facts, as it's easier to be spoon-fed establishment lies, in much the same way as children are told fairy stories that when young they believe to be true. Nonsense such as the need to build houses to solve a population expansion crisis is what I call an adult fairy tale that's peddled over and over again to enable it to sink into the soft brains of the hard of thinking. The fake need for mass immigration has mutated over the years so that with every generation they are told a different story. After World War II, my parents' generation were told that migrant workers were only here temporarily to rebuild Britain after the war. That begs the question, why didn't Britain have mass immigration after the First World War? And why didn't Russia have mass immigration after the Second World War? In reality, migrants were enticed here, it's not their fault, to lower the wages so that rich industrialists could produce cheaper goods whilst driving people into poverty. After World War II, there was a lot of hidden unemployment, despite it being a so-called economic boom period. The past has now been reinvented so as to fit the lies. The latest one is migrant workers came over to Britain as there was nobody to drive the buses and trains. Now that is a whopper of a lie, as I know for a fact it simply isn't true. If that lie had been pushed about 30 years ago, they wouldn't have got away with it. But the wartime generation that knew the facts have now sadly passed away. The people that were around just after the war that are still alive today were very young children at the time, and the lie creators know that childhood memories can be manipulated to believe a past that didn't happen. As these people's parents are now dead, they can't check the facts. As I've said many times before, immigrants have been and are used like pawns on a chessboard, and along with the indigenous population, have and are being used for an evil agenda. I have nothing against anyone except the people in power that are driving this agenda that can only end in disaster for everyone, immigrant and indigenous alike. I believe in genuine immigration, not financial ethnic cleansing. If a person from another country wants to live here because they like Britain and wish to adopt a British culture, fine, I don't have a problem. But sadly, immigrants are being financially forced to live here, which is cruel and often rips families apart. They are being forced to live here because their home countries have been deliberately indebted by the vile IMF's usury fraud or banksters' wars. Again, the ordinary innocent person, immigrant and indigenous alike, is being used as a pawn. If you tell someone with severe establishmentosis the fact that the indigenous population is rapidly declining, which has been done deliberately, yes, deliberately, mainly due to economics and other measures, so as to conform to the Coldenhove-Kalergi plan, they will simply not want to know, even though it's a provable fact. If you tell them other provable facts, such as document number FCO/1048, dated April 1971, that can be looked up at the Public Records Office and clearly shows the Heath government committed treason, again, they won't want to know. Also, every government since April 1971 is guilty of treason. Again, they won't want to know. The usual response is, what can you do about it? To reiterate, these are not conspiracy theories. They are all provable facts. I don't deal with conspiracy theories, only facts. Society is generally run by PR consultants or public relations consultants, once known as propaganda and now known as public liaison or public inquiry, of which it is anything but. The system runs on the wolf-pack mentality, or the following the leader mindset. People generally don't like to think for themselves, they prefer to have someone else to think for them. This is what the establishment PR agents or change agents tap into. The reason why is groups of people are easily infiltrated and manipulated, but individuals can't be infiltrated and pose a problem to agenda politics. Those of you that are observant may have noticed that the establishment is obsessed with pigeonholing everyone and getting people to join a group or club. The word community is constantly being said, whereas a few decades ago it was rarely, if ever, mentioned. I've noticed the rise of this word since the Berlin Wall came down and communism reinvented itself and moved from the east to the west. We have this community or that community. I live in the borough of Broxburn in Hertfordshire. Some time ago I had some sheeple bozo who had obviously been snorting a lot of establishment propaganda tell me that I'm a member of the Broxburn community. I agree with Groucho Marx when he said that he wouldn't join a club that would allow him to be a member. I have a similar view and avoid clubs and organisations like the plague, as in my view groupthink is very dangerous. And I prefer to think for myself, thank you very much. There's often adverts on the radio that say, everyone is going to the Sal. That is tapping into the follow the leader wolfpack group mentality. Looking at it logically, if everyone is going to the Sal, why are they wasting money advertising it? Now imagine if it were possible to be transported back in time, to be beamed aboard the Titanic a few days before it sank. Putting changing history aside and its possible ramifications, most people, including myself, would endeavour to save lives by warning the passengers and crew of what was about to happen. The overall majority of the passengers and crew wouldn't believe you. they would say, "The Titanic is unsinkable," and order you to stop frightening the women and children. In fact, if you are a man, you would probably get a punch on the nose from disgruntled gentlemen, and if you are a woman, would be forcibly heavily medicated. You would probably end up locked in a guarded cabin away from the rest of the passengers and looked upon as a lunatic. This is a similar situation to what we have today. There is overwhelming evidence Britain is heading towards a living hell with high-density crime-ridden cities, but the overall majority of the population don't want to believe it. The sad fact is what Britain is heading towards can be stopped, but the masses have been conditioned to promote it without realising it. Banks and industry run Britain, not governments. The banks using their usury scam and industry using their PR people to convince governments to change policy to suit the industry. The global warming scam is a typical example, and of course building developers giving sizable contributions to political parties. Please see my report that I did last year. In addition to industry lobbying government ministers, often ministers' family members have financial interests in industries that can make a fortune out of a change of policy. For example, Ernest Marples was Minister of Transport in the early 1960s. He allegedly, I believe, had family interests in road construction and was responsible for implementing the building of Britain's first motorway, the M1, that needed a lot of repair because it was so shoddily built. Another example is a British Prime Minister of the 1970s who bought some scrubland very cheaply in Wales. The Royal Mint moved part of its operation to Wales and built their premises on that scrubland, thus making the then Prime Minister a fortune. It is rumoured he must have had some inside information about the move, hence the reason for purchasing the land. There are various other examples of governments changing policies that are not necessarily for the benefit of the masses, but for the benefit of a minority of get-rich-quick merchants, such as privatising old people's homes, etc. Now let's look at a hypothetical situation. Imagine if a senior government minister has a relative that had a business manufacturing dog toilets, and inner city councils wanted to save money caring for trees, so decided to chop all the trees down. Firstly, not many people want to buy a dog toilet, and secondly, there would be a huge public outcry and protests if all the trees in inner cities were chopped down. This is where the powers that be implement problem, reaction, solution. Please go to part 2. Thank you.